Hi, folks. I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Matt Penniman. I'm the Communications and Advocacy Director for the League of Michigan Bicyclists, and I'd like to welcome you to this session of the Spoken Speaker Series, our weekly webinar on all things bike-related. In past sessions, we've looked at route finding and bike clubs and shops and what they can contribute. In this session, we're going to look at bikes and the law. So some common misconceptions, some do's and don'ts, what the law really says about where you can legally ride, how drivers have to legally interact with bicyclists, including passing, gear and gadgets, e-bikes, lights, helmets, all that good stuff. Joining us today as our featured speaker is LMB's Education Director, Jeff Carrick. Jeff, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thanks, Matt. As Matt said, I'm the Education Director for the League of Michigan Bicyclists. I've been in this role for approximately 2.5 years. Prior to that, I spent 27 years with the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office in a multitude of roles. So I have a long history in law enforcement. I also happen to be an avid cyclist, so the law and bicycling and bicycle safety is very near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about some of the, as Matt said, some of the common misconceptions out there and really try to get everybody on the same page as to what the law says. So I'll turn it back to you, Matt, and we'll move forward.
Thanks. So for our format today, instead of doing a presentation, I am going to ask Jeff questions and he's going to respond, and I'm going to ask some follow-ups, and we would love to hear your questions too as we go. So feel free to send those as a chat message. Once we get through kind of our main topic areas, we're going to open it up for a more broad discussion. Looking forward to some good back and forth and some good exchanges today. So Jeff, let's kick it off with a big one. Are cyclists riding in the roadway below the posted speed limit considered to be impeding traffic?
Matt, no, they're not. Michigan law includes bicycles under the definition of traffic. And as long as
figure out how to get my headphones working here.
As we as cyclists are riding within the confines of the law, we can't be stopped or cited for impeding the flow of traffic. Oftentimes motorists think that since we're moving lower than the speed limit that we're violating the law, and that's just not true.
Well, what about why do cyclists ride side by side? Isn't that impeding traffic?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, cyclists ride side by side for a multitude of reasons. The biggest one, and this should actually please automobile operators versus upset them, is if we have a group of, say, 20 cyclists riding down the road and they're riding in a single file line, that line is, I don't know, somewhere around 200 feet long, which means the passing distance is 200 feet. If we ride side by side, we shorten that passing distance from 200 feet to roughly 100 feet, which makes it actually safer for the cyclist and the motor vehicle operator to get through that interaction quicker.
Jeff, I know the law requires bikes to ride toward the right side of the roadway, but sometimes I see a bicyclist using the full lane. So when can bicyclists use the full lane, and who makes that decision?
Well, let's start with who makes the decision first. There's been a lot of back and forth about this with local law enforcement. What we've come to conclude is the cyclist gets to make that decision. The decision's made on a lot of things come into that. Some of the things that aren't in the law, first of all, that come into why a cyclist gets to make that decision is the equipment they're riding. So to speak, if I'm riding on a very narrow tire bicycle and the road is really rough, I'm going to move out of that rough area and ride. But if I was riding a mountain bike with a much wider tire, I may stay in that rougher part of the road just due to the equipment. Skill level comes into play. Only the cyclist on the road knows what their skill level is under any given circumstance. So higher skill level riders may ride a little bit closer to the right hand edge of the roadway, while a less skilled rider is going to ride maybe a little further left to avoid some of the obstacles that are on the right hand side of the road. And we'll get to that here shortly. One of the other factors that comes into that is the fatigue of the rider. A rider who's out and has only been out for a 2 or 3 mile ride might feel very fresh and have their wits about them. However, a rider who's been out for a ride that is longer than a century, which is 100 miles, might be tired, and they might decide that they need a little bit more of the lane in order to feel safe while they're out on the bike. So those are some of the things that go through the cyclist mind, or they're taking into consideration about themselves. And that's something nobody can take from them. Now
Yeah.
the law, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say sometimes you see a wider lane and the cyclist riding closer to the right-hand side, a narrower lane, the cyclist riding more in the middle.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. So when it comes to lane width, that's one of the factors technically under the law that we can take into consideration. If the lane is wide, it's obvious it's easier to give more of a berth, but when it's narrow, we want to take the lane in order to be safer, in order to let traffic know that we're there and not give that motor vehicle a false sense of distance to pass us, right? We'll get into the distance that a motor vehicle must pass us here shortly. There's some other reasons that the cyclist can take the full lane. One of them is to move over to the left-hand side in order to make a left-hand turn. So we can take up the lane, move to the left, in order to prepare for a left-hand turn. Kind of touched on this already, but we take into consideration the conditions of the right-hand edge of the roadway, whether it has potholes or broken asphalt. It could be other bicycles in the roadway, pedestrians along the roadway, animals,
Cars.
any type of obstacles, parked cars. One of the biggest issues we have with parked cars is somebody inadvertently opening a door into our path. And a lot of people are like, well, you're not going that fast. You should be able to avoid a door. It's not as simple as that. That door opens very quickly, and oftentimes motor vehicle operators misjudge the speed a cyclist is moving. We can take over the lane when we're riding a bike in the lane and the traffic's turning right, but we as a cyclist intend to go straight forward. So we can move to the left-hand side of traffic in order to continue through the lane. That brings up another issue, is cyclists can move over to the left to pass another bicyclist. We can also pull over to the left to pass another motor vehicle going slower than we are. So there's a multitude of reasons. The one that is I find it a little concerning, and we're allowed to do this, and by concerning is, it's just is a little weird. On a one-way street, we can ride on either the right-hand side of the roadway or on the left-hand side of the roadway. That, although we're allowed to do it, it can be a little confusing for automobile traffic, because in all other instances, we need to be on the right-hand side of the road. So, but it is one of the other ways that we can do that.
So often you will see a bike lane available, but the bicyclists aren't necessarily in the bike lane. Why do we sometimes see bicycles in the roadway when bike lanes are available?
So a lot of bike lanes are they're designed to make cyclists feel safe. That's their main, or to provide a safety net for them. Honestly, a lot of bike lanes, especially bike lanes that are up against the curb, collect a lot of debris. They collect sticks, leaves, road runoff, broken glass, you name it, you'll find it in a bike lane. So oftentimes, if the bike lane is full of debris, the cyclist will move into the roadway in order to avoid, all of that. Some cyclists are traveling at a faster speed than the bike lane is actually intended for a person to travel in. So most bike lanes are built for, I don't want to say beginner cyclists, but less confident cyclists, so their speeds are going to be lower. If I'm out riding and my normal pace is 15 to 20 mile an hour, but the traffic in the bike lane is traveling at 5 to 10 mile an hour, it's really safer for me and everybody else involved to be out with traffic.
So,
We
so all of those are reasons why you might prefer not to be in the bike lane, but don't bicyclists have to ride in the bike lane or on a path if there's one there?
Absolutely not. We've come to find that even if a bike path or a bike lane is completely adjacent to a roadway used by motor vehicles, the cyclist is not required by Michigan law to be on that path or in that bike lane. I always use this when I'm doing training around the state for law enforcement. I always use this kind of example where a lot of motor vehicles don't want us in the roadway. So if I'm riding in the city of Detroit and I'm down near Little Caesars Arena, a guy will drive by when I'm riding and go, get out of the road. And so if I jump up on the sidewalk, that same person who's now out of their motor vehicle and walking over to the arena for a sporting event or a concert is now yelling me to get off of the sidewalk. Well, which one is it? Do you want me on the road? Do you want me on the sidewalk? Where do you want me? The honest truth is we're not required to be in a bike lane, but I want you to know that a lot of us would ride in the bike lanes if they were better maintained.
So what about sidewalks? Can bikes ride on sidewalks?
That's up to local jurisdictions mostly. You'll find Michigan state law doesn't state that they have to be on a sidewalk. It also doesn't preclude them from riding on a sidewalk. But you'll find in a lot of downtown business areas that a local ordinance directs whether or not you can have a bicycle on a sidewalk. So, yeah.
Before we leave this topic of bikes in the roadway, I want to talk about a few things that bikes are not allowed to do. Are bikes allowed to ride on the left-hand side of the road on a two-way street where you can see the traffic coming toward you?
No. Bicycles must ride with and in the direction of traffic. That's dictated by Michigan state law. There's I think, I don't want to say I think, I know that where that misconception comes from is when we're young, we're taught to walk facing traffic. And I think that carries over that that's the safest way to operate a bicycle on the roadway is to see traffic coming at you. Nothing could be further from the truth. And without turning this into a dark conversation, the biggest reason is closing speeds between automobiles and bicycles. If we're heading towards each other, the closing speed is significantly higher than as if we're riding with traffic. If we were to be hit from behind, we're going to take a little bit of the bump because we're traveling at a speed above zero. So that's maybe the biggest reason is it lowers the potential for injury if we ride with traffic.
Yeah. And then the other piece I was going to ask, if we're in stopped traffic and there's multiple lanes, can we go between lanes to get through the traffic jam?
In the state of Michigan, you're not allowed to split lanes. So, you commonly see out in California, motorcycles are able to split lanes out on the highway. And the reason for that lane splitting is because back when motorcycles were air cooled, if you were to stop the motorcycle, it would obviously overheat because it wasn't being cooled by moving. It also helps to move traffic along in a sense on the highway. That said, in Michigan, if there is a bike lane to the right-hand side or technically to the left-hand side of a car, so infrastructure built specifically for a bike, and traffic is stopped, a bicycle can proceed in that bike lane or on that cyclotrack up to the traffic control device. So there is kind of an exception to that quote unquote splitting lanes.
All right. Let's move on from bikes on the roadway and talk a little bit about passing and stopping. So I understand there's a Michigan law that I have to leave 3 feet of space between my vehicle and a cyclist when I pass. But if I have to do that, how do I pass them in a no passing zone?
Question has come up multiple times over the last couple of years. The Michigan law that states that you must give a bicyclist 3 feet, a minimum of 3 feet to pass, has 2 exceptions to passing the bicycle in a no passing zone. The first and foremost, if it is safe to do so, the motor vehicle can cross over the double yellow line to give 3 feet. And then when they've passed the cyclist and it's safe to do so, they can move back into their intended lane of travel. A lot of people don't even know that. It's crazy that a lot of law enforcement officers don't even know that exception exists. The other one is if the roadway is set up in such a way that it is not possible to move across the double yellow line, motor vehicle actually can slow down to a speed that where it is safe and prudent to pass the cyclist, and they don't have to give that 3 feet. So it's similar to the move over law for first responders, where we're supposed to move over and give them a whole lane. But if we're on the highway and we're stuck in traffic, the law says that we're able to slow down to a safe speed in order to pass without moving over. It's very similar to that.
Rule of thumb, what would you say a safe and prudent speed is?
I would say to slow down to what you would consider maybe 1 or 2 mile an hour above what the bicycle's traveling at that point in time, and pass them. You honestly, in that slowdown, maybe from 25 to 10 mile an hour, you're going to lose a whole total of 5 seconds of your day. And that 5 seconds of your day is definitely worth somebody's life.
Yeah. Passing them at a walking speed as if you were walking by them. Yeah.
Yep. Just
Cool.
slowly getting past them.
Great. So how is that 3-foot distance determined? Where measured from where to where?
So a lot of people want to think that it's, the easy one. You look at the middle of the bicycle and then you measure 3 feet out from there. And then you measure from 3 feet from the outer body panel or the door of the motor vehicle. And a lot of people think that's the 3 feet. In reality, the 3 feet is the widest part of the bicyclist. And you notice I didn't say the widest part of the bicycle. If I am on my bike and my elbows are flared out, the 3 feet is from the edge of my elbow. The 3 feet starts for the motor vehicle at the very outer edge of their mirror. So we're measuring from the widest portion of the motor vehicle to the widest portion of the bicyclists. And that could be the bicycle or, again, a body part that is extended out. Now, I don't want to give anybody the idea that anytime a car passes to take your left hand off of the handlebars and hold it out, now creating almost a 6-foot passing zone. That's probably not going to work well for you at the end of the day. So I just want to give that caveat.
Fair enough. Is it legal for a bicyclist to not stop for a stoplight or stop sign?
Bicyclists, like motor vehicles, are required to stop for all traffic control devices, stop sign and or a stop light. There's oftentimes you're going to see us. I think you're going to lead to this. I'll just
Yeah. So why do you see people do it anyway?
Well, if you look statistically where a cyclist is most likely to be struck, it's going to be in and around an intersection. There's a multitude of reasons for that. So for a cyclist, in our mind, we're thinking about, how do I get out of the place that I'm most likely to get hit the fastest? You will see them. I'm not going to make an excuse for those that are the cycling flyers that just blow through them. Prudent cyclists who are really looking at this from a safety aspect are going to roll up to that stop sign. They may slow roll up to it, and if they are sure that there's no cross traffic that's going to interfere with them, or they're not going to interfere with the flow of traffic, they're going to continue on through. At a stoplight, you'll see them come up to that stoplight to absolutely ensure that there is no cross traffic. They're probably going to stop and put their foot down, and then they're going to continue on through, once again, to clear the intersection. There's another reason they do it beyond safety, and it's straight up courtesy to motor vehicles. If Matt and I and Jim Plunt are out on a bike ride and we actually act like traffic as 3 cyclists, and we come up to a stop sign, we would be required, each one of us, to come and stop, ensure that we can clear traffic, and then proceed through one at a time. I could honestly tell you, if you want to hear horns start flying off of cars, start using that as a technique, and you will quickly see people get upset. They also get upset that we proceed through three people all in one as a one basic motor vehicle unit, but it's a courtesy thing.
So you mentioned intersections being hazardous. What are some of the most common issues at an intersection for cyclists?
So the two biggest issues that we run into are the right hook and the left cross, and I'll explain those. The right hook is where a cyclist is traveling in a straight line and a motor vehicle makes a right-hand turn in front of them. Oftentimes what you'll see is the motor vehicle, once again, driver is um, interpreted the speed of the bicyclist and they feel that they have enough time to accelerate around and make that right-hand turn. So that's one of our biggest issues. The second issue is the left cross, and that's where a motor vehicle and a cyclist are closing on each other head on. And once again, operator of motor vehicle misjudges the speed of the cyclist and decides they have enough time to make that left-hand turn in front of the cyclist. The other time a left hook occurs is when a cyclist is in the shadow of a motor vehicle. The motor vehicle goes straight through the intersection and another car makes a left-hand turn and they don't see the cyclist behind that first motor vehicle. So once again, they're looking for motor vehicle traffic. They're not really looking for the cyclist in that kind of almost a blind spot.
Yeah. How about what's proper etiquette when a motorist stops, even if they have the right of way, and motions for the cyclist to go in front of them? And sometimes that happens when there's a bike path across a roadway and the bike path has a stop sign, but the motorist, maybe there's multiple lanes and the motorist stops and gestures to the bicyclist to cross.
We should be giving the motorist the come on through. You have the right of way. What what we see around the state of Michigan is different communities handle things differently. And what that does is it provides a false sense of you're riding in an area. I'll give you an example. In the city of Detroit, where I ride a lot, the majority of the motor vehicle traffic is super courteous. They do the stop, come on through, everybody's fine. And we're very comfortable with that here. However, that's not particularly the philosophy or how the community of Grand Rapids handles things. So if I am a Detroit cyclist and I travel to the city of Grand Rapids, my mind is that car is going to slow down, stop, and wave me through. And when they don't, we have a problem. I either get hit or I get upset because my expectations have been set a very specific way. It's better for us as a cycling community to really help set those expectations across the state of Michigan so that motor vehicle operators aren't confused when they come across us, and we aren't confused when we leave our home riding areas.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, that's a good point. Want to move on from passing and stopping to, first note that that was a question from Jim Plant on the chat. And if other folks have questions, please feel free to add those in the chat. So moving on to our next section, I want to talk a little bit about gear and gadgets, starting with helmets. So are bicyclists required to wear helmets in Michigan? And what about when riding an e-bike?
So for our purposes, we'll call a traditional bicycle completely human powered. There's no requirement for a helmet in the state of Michigan. You can ride a bike with or without a helmet. Matt is going to put his helmet on because we're in a very dangerous situation. We're getting ready to go ride our bike. We as the league, and I personally will tell you, you should put a helmet on every time you throw your leg over a bicycle, whether that is to go down to the local Dairy Queen to grab a cone, or it's you just finished washing and lubing your bike and you need to take it to make sure that it shifts and brakes correctly. There are a lot of falls and crashes that occur on a bicycle in the most mundane places. And those are the ones that will create the biggest potential for injury for you. When we get to e-bikes, it gets a little trickier. There is a helmet requirement for juveniles 14 to 18 years old to wear a helmet while operating a class 3 e-bike. Otherwise, there's no helmet requirement for e-bikes. So pretty, it's pretty simple. That if it's that faster e-bike, got to wear a helmet if you're underage. So,
Makes sense.
and you
Uh,
also must be 14 years old to operate a class 3 e-bike in the state of Michigan.
Another requirement question, what about lights?
I love this question because this is one of my this is my gotcha question all the time. I ask it, are bicycles required to have a front and rear light in the state of Michigan during darkness? And I always get the 100%, they are 100% required to have a front and rear light in the state of Michigan. That's not totally true. You're required to have a white light to the front and a red rear reflector shortly after dawn and shortly after dusk and shortly before dawn every day. The red reflector needs to be seen from 500 and some odd feet distance. Nobody is going to measure that. I suggest if you have the means to use a red light in conjunction with the red reflector. When I talk to law enforcement, they're always like, this is awesome because nobody ever has a red reflector on the back of their bike. I can speak personally. I don't. I have a couple of red blinkies that I use, and I let law enforcement know that that red blinky is probably 10 times safer than that red reflector will ever be. You can see it for a much further distance. I don't need the beams of the headlight beams to shine on me to let you know that I'm there. You can see it way, way off in the distance. And they have a tendency to agree. They're like, you know what? I don't think I would ever stop anybody for thinking that safe forward. So, does that clarify, or did I just muddy the waters with white lights and red reflectors and red lights?
No, I think you're good. I think it comes back to bicyclists do have a responsibility to be visible after dark, and that's the purpose of the light requirement.
Absolutely.
And a lot of e-bikes have lights built in, which helps, but it does raise the question, are e-bikes motor vehicles?
It's always that's the number one question, and we are all over the place in some areas, but the law is very, very direct on this for the state. Michigan law, class 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes are defined as a bicycle. They are not a motor vehicle. However, we are afforded all the same and are afforded all the same rights and responsibilities as a bicycle. So you can't be stopped on your class 2 throttle assist e-bike and arrested for being intoxicated under the OUI laws. There's other things that address that, but it's not going to be a traffic offense.
Jim asks, how about bike horns, bells, etc.? When are you required to give an audible signal?
When overtaking and passing pedestrians, you should be giving it overtaking and passing other cyclists. There is no requirement to have any of those on your bicycle at this point in time. However, if you're a kind and considerate cyclist, you should have at least a bell on your bike so that you can let people know that you're coming up, passing them. Also, while we're talking about that, you know, we've taught call out passing on your left, and that causes its own whole thing, because when we say on your left or passing on your left, inevitably the person we're letting know moves to the left. So finding that, you know, ringing that bell and making sure, calling out and letting your presence be known in some way, shape, or form really, really does help. But that passing on your left sometimes causes more problems than it solves for us.
It's a tricky one.
Yeah.
I always debate whether to ring or shout out when I'm passing somebody. Speaking of e-bikes, can we ride an e-bike anywhere a traditional bicycle can be ridden?
That's a tricky question, Matt. That is widely up to, so first and foremost, we can ride them on any public roadway. They're a bicycle, afforded the same rights and responsibilities. Where it gets tricky is when we start talking about pathways, so paved pathways, linear trails, natural surface, single track, non-motorized trails. Those things are a little trickier. That's widely up to local landowners at this point in the state of Michigan. Two examples are an example for single track trail is right now the DNR is considering opening up natural surface single track trail to class 1 and class 2 e-bikes under a trial period. Currently, you can't ride in a class 1, 2, or 3 e-bike on any DNR property. But then you look at a place like Settlers Park in Heartland Township, that's a township park, and class 1 e-bikes are accepted there. So there's your difference. We also have situations like TART Trails, which is a locally managed linear trail system in the northern part of the state, allowing e-bikes. Yet the White Pine Trail, which runs from Grand Rapids to Cadillac, is a state funded trail. E-bikes are not allowed. So we need to start figuring out as a state how we're going to treat this so that we can move forward and make sure that we have access statewide for people who are in need of that little extra punch.
And I think that maybe the key is that word little. An e-bike under state law can only have a motor of up to 750 watts, which is 1 horsepower. There are a lot of things that are marketed as e-bikes that are really more like little electric dirt bikes that have a motor of more than 750 watts. And at that point, you're talking about an off-road vehicle. It's no longer considered a bicycle under state law. It's no longer allowed on trails that bicycles are, that are intended for bicycles, period. All right, well, that gets us through kind of our initial topics that we had outlined. I know folks have been listening. I appreciate the comments that have come in. At this point, I'd like to open it up for questions and see who has questions for Jeff or myself or other misunderstandings, misconceptions, areas of confusion that you'd like to dissect together. Dave Duffield asks, why is the auto window tinting law not enforced in our state? That's a good one.
A great question.
And why does it matter for bicyclists? Why should bicyclists care about auto window tint?
So why should bicyclists care about auto window tint? That's a great question. First and foremost, because we know that at a stop sign, if we make visual eye contact, we can ensure that that person saw us. And that's what like one of the number one things when we come to a stop or we're getting ready to leave from a stop on an intersection is that eye contact. That way we know that they saw us. With window tint, you can't make that eye contact. You can't ensure that occurred. We, again, here in the Detroit area, oftentimes we'll come up to an intersection and there'll be a car stopped and they'll be in their car with their window tint waving us on and we can't even see it. And now you're at this standoff at the intersection. We're not moving and they're not moving, right? So why isn't it enforced? It's a really, really good question. So I have to lead with this caveat on this. I've been retired from law enforcement for over 8 years. So I'm a little rusty on some of what's going on in the enforcement world from that standpoint. The biggest issue is the equipment needed to measure the level of tint is expensive and you have to be trained on it. And quite honestly, even when the ticket's written, 9 out of 10 times before the respondent gets to court on that civil infraction ticket, they have went to their doctor and gotten a prescription for it, and the magistrate ends up having to toss it out. So it's a law that's enforceable to a point, but at the end of the day, nobody's keeping it, it's the tickets are getting tossed out at the magistrate level.
Continuing on that theme, we have a question from Ken Martinek. What the law says a bicyclist can do and what motorists think the law says are very different. The motorists get angry and law enforcement officers don't seem to understand the laws or even enforce traffic laws sometimes. How do we get more education to and traffic enforcement out of our police departments?
We can start with the media helping us get these comments out there and having I don't want to say PSAs because PSAs are terrible, but those clips where we can call out like incidents where law enforcement didn't do what they were supposed to do. The other piece is, and to your point, Ken, is getting the education to law enforcement officers. I work under a grant through the Office of Highway Safety Planning. I provide a roughly a 4-hour course on what the laws are, how they can be enforced, what it means to be a bicyclist, what it means to have been a former law enforcement officer and have seen what you're bringing up in action. I'm hoping we're working on some more requirements that when grant funding is pushed out for bicycle and pedestrian safety enforcement, that they have to come and spend 4 hours with me and my 2 currently active police officer colleagues and have good conversations about how to enforce these laws, not just the laws against bicyclists, but what to look for motor vehicle violations in and around cyclists and cycling infrastructure. This will be a shameless plug. At some point in the month of May, I'm working with the city of Ferndale to do a bicycle safety for law enforcement class. It's going to be kind of watered down and more focused on letting the community know what this is, but it's definitely going to be that law enforcement class, like that content. And that's going to be hopefully available in person and live stream.
We have a comment that the head of the Police Chiefs Association in Michigan says that when he was the chief in Livonia, judges dismissed the tickets all the time.
That doesn't surprise me. It's not, and I wouldn't say they just dismissed the tickets. I'm guessing they didn't dismiss, but they reduced the charges or the violation. So pretty common in the state of Michigan. If you were to receive a speeding ticket out on the expressway, you would show up in court and that citation would be reduced to most often impeding traffic, which is a 0 points citation, costs the exact same amount for fines and costs as the speeding ticket did. So the courts get what they need, which is money in order to operate. And you got what you needed, which were no points and no moving violation on your record, which means your insurance doesn't increase. It's an unfortunate truth. I am leading a research grant right now, looking at citations that were issued during bicycle and pedestrian safety enforcement initiatives to find out what the ultimate outcome of those citations were, and then to provide feedback to both the enforcement agency and the district courts where those citations would have been handled, to let them know like what the total impact was. We are in the second year of a 5-year citation or rotation on that grant. So we hope to have some really good data here in the next couple of months. It's been a hard push to get everything we need to really look at this, but we are looking at it through a pretty tight looped lens, I'll say that.
Well, and seeing the difficulty in using enforcement to try and change behavior, I think it argues for the value of safer road design in the first place, of protected bike lanes, self-enforcing designs where it's obvious when you use the road how to keep bicyclists safe. And the road design reaches everyone. Enforcement is only going to reach those few folks that get pulled over for a violation. Ken also asks, like reducing a ticket for hitting a bicyclist to, quote, double parking. He also asks, where are we at with VRU laws? And I can take that one briefly. There is a VRU bill package that has been introduced in the Michigan House and Senate. It's bipartisan, sponsored by 3 Democrats and 1 Republican. 2 bills in the House, 2 bills in the Senate. The bills in the House had a hearing. Oh, VRU is vulnerable roadway users. And so that's people who bike, pedestrians, wheelchair users, skateboarders, Amish folks in buggies, you name it. People who do not have the protection of a steel frame car or truck around them, but are using the roadway. So these bills would would provide for felony charges for a moving violation causing serious injury or a moving violation causing death to a vulnerable roadway user. It would define vulnerable roadway user, and it would define serious injury as one that requires treatment in a hospital. So those bills, the House bills had a hearing before the House Transportation Committee last week. And the Senate bills are getting a hearing before the Senate Civil Rights and Judiciary Committee tomorrow. I got a chance to testify last week to the House Committee, along with Paul Runnels from Bike Friendly Kalamazoo, who was one of the survivors of the 2016 chain gang crash that unfortunately killed quite a few bicyclists in Kalamazoo. And I'm hoping that Paul will be able to testify along with me tomorrow as well to the Senate. So we just expressed the value of this legislation for holding people accountable when they are involved in a crash and are negligent and that someone is seriously injured or killed as a result. So I think the committee members were fairly supportive. The House Transportation Committee did not meet this week, but next time they meet, we're hoping to see them vote on the bills and vote them out of committee. Our advocacy day is coming up on May 14th, and the vulnerable roadway user bill package is our top priority that we'll be communicating to lawmakers on that day. Hope you can join us on May 14th. Going back through our chat messages, we also had a question about rolling coal. Is rolling coal illegal?
This is my favorite conversation lately. Is rolling coal illegal? Yes, it is. There's a couple of statutes that cover it. One is the emission of noxious fumes from an automobile. There's also a little known law that I was able to dig up that basically says the modification of a vehicle to emit noxious fumes and smoke is a felony in the state of Michigan. The question is, will it get enforced and who's willing to enforce it? This kind of goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier when it comes to the prosecution, the judges handling cases. I was going through the chat while Matt was talking. So Ken was like the judge reducing a cyclist being hit to a double parking complaint. That's a travesty of the criminal justice system right there. And it's, I will play partial blame on law enforcement for allowing that to happen. I will put partial blame on the city attorney or state prosecutor who should have handled that, should have not allowed that to happen without, talking with the victim of that, and a magistrate or judge for looking at that through such a small lens and saying this is the easiest way to get from A to B. The same thing with rolling coal. You have to find somebody who's willing to A, investigate it, B, authorize it and prosecute it, and then a judge that's really willing to see it for what it is. That's my short version of the criminal justice system breakdown. Yes, it's illegal. Short one.
Thanks, Jeff. That gets us through our questions that we had. I guess I would put out a question to the audience of what are the most common misconceptions that you've seen that we have not addressed yet so far today? Are there other misconceptions about bikes in the law, or just points of confusion that you've heard about or seen that you haven't heard us address so far? Okay.
Matt,
Jim comments, bicyclists who feel they must be outside the fog line on the right side of the road. That does seem like a point of confusion. Yeah. Jeff, do you want to speak to that one?
so again, bicyclists do not have to ride to the right-hand side of the fog line. They are allowed to use the lane. Um, we feel sometimes that riding on the right-hand side of the fog line is being, courteous to motor vehicle traffic. It may be. That depends on how wide that shoulder is. If you're talking a 6-inch shoulder, you should be in the lane of traffic. If you're talking 8-foot wide paved shoulder, yeah, riding on the right-hand side of the fog line might be the best place depending on motor vehicle, traffic, volume, road conditions, and a whole bunch of other things come into play on that. I don't know anybody who feels they must be outside of it. I know that they know most cyclists know that they can be outside of it.
Thank you, Jeff.
I,
Any other, go ahead, sorry.
I do have one thing. If once we get through any others, I want to talk about what happens or how you can best interact with the police if you're involved in a incident with a motor vehicle.
Please do, yeah.
So just so you know, I use the same piece with the police when I train them. When we're involved as a cyclist in an incident with a motor vehicle, it's probably the closest thing to a police critical incident that most of us citizens are ever going to feel. Fortunately for me, I can speak to both sides of it. I've been involved in traffic altercation with a motor vehicle. I've been involved in a critical incident on the police side. The exact same things happen to both people. You have what's called tunnel vision occurs. So you have your vision narrows down. You have a thing that happens that's called audio exclusion, where you don't hear things that actually occurred while you were there. So you shut down and you can see a very small part of the world and you can't hear most of it. The best example I can give everybody here is if you have a spouse or a significant other, the minute you get into some type of a little bit of an argument, the only thing you can do is focus on that person and all you can hear is them. The world could be getting destroyed around you, but you're focused on this problem right here. So that's the simplest thing. I let police officers know that happens. I'm letting you know that happens to you as well. What we have a tendency to do is as soon as the altercation occurs is we call 911 and we are at a heightened awareness. We have an adrenaline dump that's occurred in our body. We're upset. We have every reason to be. We're maybe crying, maybe angry. There's a plethora of emotion that can go through our body. When the police show up, the first thing they want to do is get you calmed down so they can figure out what happened. And they walk up and they go, calm down, which only makes you get more upset, crying, whatever it is. What I have suggested and what has worked here for a couple of friends of mine is if the altercation or the incident is caught on video, they stand by, they relax, they finish their ride, they go home, they take a shower, they pull the video that they have of the incident, and then they go to the police station and meet with whoever the desk officer is and report it there. It does a couple of things. It allows you to get yourself back under control a little bit. And here's the key thing, process what occurred so that you can report it accurately. If you try to report something directly after it happens, you have a very skewed view of what occurred. As time passes, you're actually able to recall more detail and provide that detail as you're reporting it. It doesn't work for everybody, but I know for a fact that at least 6 3-foot passing violations have been issued based on that approach to reporting it to the police. Hopefully that will help you get through some type of traffic altercation, anything a little bit easier, and understand that, quite honestly, the one place where our first responders and your lives cross is when there is an incident like this. You guys have really, really felt the exact same thing. Let me know if that was helpful or not. It just basically what I'm asking for is give it a little bit of time and space, and you'll probably get a better outcome at the end of the day.
It's a very good point. I will say the only time in my life I've felt road rage was when I was close passed by a driver, and I felt this immediate urge to bike furiously up to them and catch up and bang on their windows and shout at them for passing me too close. I didn't do that, but I sure wanted to, and that would not have been helpful to anyone. Well, Jeff, thank you for that insight. Does anyone else have any final questions before we wrap up? We're coming to the end of our hour. Well, I want to thank you all for spending some time with us over your lunch break. And this has been a great discussion, Jeff. And thank you everyone for contributing your thoughts and questions and comments in the chat. We are going to post this recording to YouTube like our previous recordings. And thank you all for being part of the Spoken Speaker Series today. I will be back with another session next Wednesday.
Thank you all. Thank you for spending your time with us today.